Okay, so welcome, Cam, to this conversation. I'm super thrilled that you're here. Thank you for waking me up in an early morning in Australia. Here it's late at night. And I just said this before I press record, and I want to repeat it. When I was preparing the pleasure school of this year's and knowing that hopefully many men will join, I was thinking who would be the dream guest I would like to talk to and make a million of questions. Oh, there is this awesome man in Australia. I follow him for a long time now. I'm just going to take a shot. And you said, yes, thank you so much. It's an honor to talk to you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much for reaching out. And I'm excited that I get to speak to people all around the world, including Argentina. I think you're probably the first person that I know who I've spoken to from Argentina. So it's very exciting for me as well. I really thank you.
Thank you, Cam. Um, so to bring Argentina and Australia a bit more closer to each other, um, I follow you since you're quite popular. Yeah, so inspiring many people, talking about taboo topics, inspiring me a lot. But I don't know how you got there, who you are. I would love to know what in your life brought you where you are right now, working with masculinity and sexuality and pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for asking. It's a long story, but I'll be concise. When I was 17, I traveled from Australia to America, actually the United States of America. I was a soccer player, so I was able to get a sporting scholarship to play at a university over there. And the university I went to was in Georgia. For me, people that are familiar with the geography of the United States, that's in the deep South. It's a very Christian conservative. The school that I went to was Baptist, specifically. And so there was a lot of religious shame and guilt around sexuality, particularly. And I was studying psychology. That was the major that I was studying. And the one class that I took that was related to sexuality was called Christian Approaches to Human Sexuality. So it was like very stereotypical. No premarital sex, that's a sin. Homosexuality is a sin. Contraception is not talked about. Masturbation is not necessarily a sin, but it's looked down upon. Like, it was very rigid in its belief system around what sexuality should look like. And this is what a man is, this is what a woman is, this is what men and women do. And it was very, it was like quite a bit of a culture shock to me, actually, because in Australia, particularly where I grew up, it's not very religious. Definitely not to the extent that it is in America. So I had this, I had this like a light bulb moment. I was like, oh wow, sex education and sex therapy and psychology. Like, people need education around this, because I saw like what that lack of education was manifesting as in the community that I was in. So there's lots of young men that weren't really healthily expressing their sexuality. A lot of stalking, a lot of like weird behavior, quite a lot of emotional abuse in these young people's relationships. A lot of people getting married really young so that they could have sex, and then because contraception was not talked about, and then a lot of like really early pregnancies as well. I had a good friend of mine. I was 17 at the time. She was 18. She already had 2 kids,
Wow.
which isn't inherently bad, I suppose, but it was like she didn't really have a choice because she didn't know about contraception and she wanted to have sex, and so she had to get married. And so it's just very like, didn't seem like the most healthy expression of sexuality. You just like I said, a light bulb moment came on. I was like, oh, I could talk about this. I could teach about this. That was kind of like the first light bulb that I had. The other one was my own personal experience with regards to my sexuality and my masculinity. So playing a sport over in America, I was very much part of that like locker room culture with regards to like what it means to be a young man. So like sexual experiences were talked about in a very like macho, machismo kind of way. It was like, it wasn't about pleasure. It was about like conquering and like trying to have as much sex as possible. And, it was like quantity over quality, essentially. Like, it was not very good attitude to have towards sex. And so like, it felt like I was always like performing my masculinity, like pretending to be someone who I wasn't. Like, it never really sat well with me, but I didn't want to get bullied by my friends. I didn't want to get ostracized by my male peer group. I always wanted to try and fit in. And in order to fit in with that group of men, I had to like put on my masculinity and talk about women in a certain way, talk about gay men in a certain way. That's what I felt anyway. And so I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of like, I just wasn't very mentally healthy. And that manifested sexually in a bunch of different ways. So like I drank a lot in order to like feel confident and have that courage in order to like be sexual with a woman. I felt like I needed to drink a lot because I was drinking to get rid of that anxiety. I ended up experiencing like what's called alcohol-induced erectile dysfunction, or just not being able to get an erection because you're too drunk.
Yeah.
So that was a frequent occurrence for me because I was drinking quite a lot. When I was less drunk and more anxious, that would manifest as like premature ejaculation because I was really tense and tight and really holding that in my body. And then I was just like really disconnected from the sex that I was having with these young women. I was watching a lot of porn at the time. I was like trying to emulate what I saw in porn because I didn't know any better. And so the sex that I was having was really disconnected. I wasn't talking. I wasn't asking questions. It was just a shit show, to be honest with you. So very serendipitously, I actually I injured my back. I fractured my lower spine, and so I had to do clinical rehabilitation. Part of my rehab was
Were you still 17 or was it later?
I mean, I had fractured my back when I was 15, and I'd gone through some rehab already, but I re-injured it when I was in America at around about the age of 19.
Okay.
So I ended up going to Pilates as part of my rehab and seeing a massage instructor, and through that I was introduced to yoga. They said yoga will help, so I started doing yoga, and my yoga teacher said, oh, you maybe try some breath work. And so my breath work teacher then said, maybe try some meditation. And then I was introduced to all these like really beautiful modalities, these healing modalities. And so I started, releasing stuff from my body, not only just physical tension, but also emotions that I had like stored in my body for so long. I remember halfway through a Pilates class or a yoga class, I would like burst out into tears, or I would like have all this like anger come up me if I like was struggling to hold this posture. And I was like, this is weird. Like, where's all this emotion coming from? And so as a 19-year-old man, I was like, fuck, I can't let my friends find out that I'm crying in yoga. I got to go sort this out. So I went and saw a counselor, and my counselor put me onto a psychologist. And so very slowly over the next couple of years, seeing a psychologist regularly, I started to do what's called narrative therapy, which is like rewriting the stories that I told myself about what it means to be a man, what it means to be sexual, what it means to be a human being, like how do I show up in the world, all this sort of stuff that I'd been pretending for so long. I started to just let that go and be like, well, what's authentic and genuine to me, and what do I actually feel in my body, and what do I feel, in terms of how I show up. And so like in the nicest sense of the word, I stopped giving a fuck what people thought about me. I stopped caring what my mates thought about me, and started just being the way that I wanted to be. And so that for me was like, when I heard my mates talking about women in a certain way, it was speaking out against that. And there was a period of time where I lost some friends and shifted my peer group. But because I started like being a bit more confident in who I was, and I was a bit more self-assured, and I was less tense in my body, I was doing talk therapy work, and I was also doing like the body work with Pilates and yoga and massage. I started like, we'll speak specifically about sex, but I started like, talking to my sexual partners. I started asking them, what are they into? What do you enjoy? Started talking about what I enjoy, started like opening up, having conversations. I was less tense and less anxious. I started to drink less as well. So like I was more in my body. I was more able to tune into pleasure. I was able to like breathe as well. Like that was a huge part of my journey, was like learning how to breathe properly. And so I wasn't ejaculating so quickly. I wasn't so worried about whether I had an erection or not. And so I had just this like beautiful transformative process when it came to like the way that I was being sexual. And the same thing kind of applied to my masculinity as well. I started really questioning all that sort of stuff. And so that was around the age of 19, 20. And so I'm 20, what am I, 28 now. And yeah, so I graduated and was really, because I had this personal experience, was really interested in like the intersection between spirituality and like, body work and all these beautiful modalities, and like talk therapy and academia and like the Western medicine side of things. I wanted to explore that crossover where those two worlds meet. So I went traveling, did some plant medicine in South America of all places. I've got family in Peru. So I went to
Mm.
Peru a few times. I went to Thailand as well. I ordained as a Buddhist monk in Thailand. I went to India, did some yoga teacher training. I was very privileged and very lucky to be able to travel a lot. Then I came back to Australia and I did my postgraduate degree in sexology, which is the study of human sexuality. And then, started working as a counselor and then niched into coaching, sex coaching, because it offers a lot more freedom in terms of the modalities that I can draw on. And then niched again in working with men because I'm a man and that's what I can speak into with some sort of authority. And then, it's just kind of blossomed from there. So that's a very condensed 8 years. But yeah, the crux of it was those experiences that I had at the age of like 17, 18, 19. That's what really pushed me into this work.
Yes. Oof, thank you. Thank you for talking so generously about your path. I didn't knew you were so young. I think it's awesome that with only it's a lot, but it's still really young. 28 years you have blossomed and do all of this process, and I think that's what I see from the outside for the past years. Like you went through these things you're talking about, and only listening to your story now, of course, you mentioned it all. I think one of the terms I always quote you because I just love this English fan word, which is confidence. I the mixture between, I say it for the Spanish speaking people, like cock, which is the human man penis, and with confidence. And of course, now that I listen to your story, I understand where it comes from. So thank you so much for this authenticity, because now I know more when I see you, what you share, where it comes from. So that's
Thank you.
wonderful.
I appreciate you asking me as well and for listening as well. I recognize I spoke for a little while there. So thanks for just bearing with me.
Yeah, no, because it makes it real, it really, and I think even there you're talking about a wound of masculinity, which all of your stories, I think it has in common this pressure to what it means to be a man.
Mm.
And from my perspective, I come from an other kind of pressure, and our genitals are in the inside, and there's a mystery, and we don't know about so many things that we really need to know about, and there's this that other people, the gynecologist knows more about the female body than my own, and the pleasure is for somebody else, and all of these things.
Mm.
But for the last years I've been thinking about, damn, it must be really difficult to have a penis. And there's so much pressure on that. So much, you have to be this way and you have to be this porn star. And it's great. There's like, I feel there's a shift from men emptying themselves and woman's body and don't giving a fuck and just getting off, and that's it with anybody, to men waking up and saying, oh no, female pleasure is really important. But now the pressure that is there, like, and you have to last for hours and you have to be this Greek god that does tricky things and makes her squirt and make her come 1,000 times. And maybe you're in a spiritual path and they tell you you don't ejaculate because then you're more evolved, and that's so much pressure as well. So yeah.
Yeah,
uh,
I often think there's like no middle ground for a lot of like I know I speak specifically to men, but you're right. Like there's a lot of guys go from this space of watching porn and being like, oh God, I've got to have like a massive dick and I've got to like,
yeah,
pump away like a machine for like an hour because that's how long the video goes for. And it's like, I got to ejaculate at the end. And it's like this, I got to look really buff. All the male porn stars like really ripped. And they have this like really big expectation of like what they should be. And then, maybe because the only other people that I see talking about sexuality are, or expressing it in a way, are like the spirituality community, right? The sacred sexuality community, the tantric community, and then these guys go from the porn star kind of watching porn a lot to that community, and it's like now you've got to last hours upon hours and have valley orgasms and non-ejaculatory multiple
yeah,
orgasms, and you've got to like no ejaculating as well, and female pleasure, you've got to facilitate her to be open, and it's like, oh my God, now I've got all this pressure on me, and there's no like middle ground. There's no like, hey, you can just have like a sexual experience that's like, enjoyable and pleasurable, and take the pressure off and just like relax into it. And you can bring a partner into that, and you can do it by yourself. You can do it with multiple people. It doesn't really matter. Like, there's no, well, at least from what I've seen, there's no like transitional period between that. It's like you go from one to the other, and there's no room for that middle ground. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I quite like that middle ground. I'm not super esoteric and spiritual. Maybe I was when I first started this journey, and I definitely don't subscribe to that kind of like porn star way of having sex anymore. But I think there's like this beautiful middle ground that is really valuable to explore.
Yeah, and I mean, there's where pleasure is able to express, because this pressure, I think pleasure and pressure, it's these English words that are quite similar. But yeah, keep an eye on it. That's what I feel. No, and actually, Tantra, what it does is say everything is welcome, and in everything we can find divinity, and everything we can find the possibility to growth. But sometimes we have this, we restricted. No? It's like this: you have to be multi-orgasmic, don't ejaculate, and I don't know what, and that's a lot of pressure. So thank you for saying that you agree with me. I am curious, because you have this experience, your own experience, and you have worked with so many men in these years. Is your personal experience also what you recognize is the main burdens that men have, or are there even more? What do men struggle with when they come to you mainly?
Yeah, I guess my story does definitely resonate with men. I think that's probably one of the reasons why men seek me out, is because they do see a bit of themselves in that story. But in terms of like the most common things that people ask me, I mean, every day, without a fail, every single day, someone will ask me, how do I last longer?
Yeah.
Will ask me, how do I get or maintain an erection? Like, I've got erection issues. And without fail, every single day, someone will ask me, how do I make my dick bigger? Those are the three
Wow.
major questions that I get asked, like without fail, every single day, either on one of my social media platforms. And those questions, like, I can speak into them very like superficially. I can say how to last longer. It's like, you know, learn how to breathe properly, do some squeeze techniques. Like, I can give those answers, that kind of like very direct surface level answer. Same thing with like how to get and maintain an erection. I can talk about, use a cock ring, use a cock pump, if you want, or focus on slowing down and feeling pleasure, because that's where engorgement comes from. I can talk about that. Same thing with penis size as well. It's like, maybe do some. There's not really much you can do. You kind of like born with what you got. But when I dig underneath the surface of those questions, when I kind of like ask some more, if I'm feeling generous and I've got a social media, question, I'll maybe like go underneath a little bit and ask a little bit more in depth. But definitely, if I'm doing something one-on-one with a client, I'll ask those questions. But really, what's underneath that is like some self-worth issue. It's
Yes.
like I want to last longer because I'm not lasting long enough, and I'm not lasting long enough. That means I'm less of a man. I'm not a good lover. That means my partner might leave me. That means I'm less than someone else. It's a very much like a comparative, competitive, like I'm not enough type of mentality that's underneath that question. Same thing with like not being able to get an erection. Like, it means something about his masculinity. It means something about his manhood. It means something about him as a man. Same thing with a penis. And the size of it. Like, it means something about his self or his masculinity. So like a lot of the underlying mentality behind a lot of those questions is like, am I enough, or how do I be enough? And so there's a lot of anxiety about not being enough in for men, sexually speaking. So and that looks a little bit different for each man, but that's definitely the common thread that I find. And that was definitely true for me as well. If I reflect on my own personal experience, I thought in order to be a man, in order to be enough, I had to have sex with a lot of young women. I thought that in order to be a man sexually, I had to last a really long time, and be assertive and be dominant and be masculine in that very rigid, stereotypical way. And a lot of guys have similar ideas. And so I try and answer those questions because they're asking for a reason. They do want to last longer, and there's nothing wrong with wanting to last longer by any means. And I can definitely talk about that. But it's also important to not only address the technique and the strategies for lasting longer, but then also to address the underlying psychology behind why you want to last longer. What does it mean for you to last longer? Because if you're just doing the techniques and the strategies and you do last a little bit longer, it's not really going to change your approach to sex. It's not going to change the experience necessarily that you have with a partner. It's not going to change your attitude around sexuality and masculinity. And so it's not going to have too much of an impact, at least in my opinion. But answering those deeper questions, those more introspective questions of like, what does sexuality mean to me? What does my masculinity mean to me? How do I approach that? Do I have any anxieties or fears about not being masculine enough, or whatever it might be? That'll radically shift the way that you approach sex and your experience of sexuality and your experience with a partner and how you show up in the world. And I think that's a lot more powerful, at least in my opinion anyway. So yeah, on social media, I often talk about the surface level stuff. Here's 20 things you can do to last longer. But then what I do when I do in my work one-on-one is I go a lot deeper into that, because I think that's really necessary.
Yes. When you start talking about these 3 common questions they ask you, my heart went like, oof, and my stomach, I don't know, I felt so many things at the same time, but the image or the feeling inside of me is how we talked about pressure. How much pressure is there? And also how much, how you say it in English? Hurt, like a wound. How is it? Pain. Thank you. Pain. That was the word. How much pain are underneath that questions?
Yeah, totally.
That was like my first sensation was pain, and then as you said, I think the pain is I'm the question of who am I and what's my worth, what's my value, linked to sexuality. So thank you very much for sharing that. And again, it puts light on my hypothesis that it's really difficult to be a man. And I think it's important to talk about that.
Yeah, I guess like if I could put it into a like framework, it's very performance oriented, right? It's like focused on, and when we focus on performance, we got to then focus on competition, right? We got to perform better than someone else, and so I've got to last longer than someone else. I've got to like give my partner more orgasms than someone else. I've got to have a bigger penis than someone else. It's all about how you measure up if you're thinking about how you perform sexually. And a lot of guys are in that frame of reference, and they, a lot of guys will talk to me about like, oh, my partner, she's had other men in her life that have been, had a bigger penis, and it's like very much like this anxious mentality around like, how do I measure up to someone else? And so they're preoccupied with all these questions. How do I last longer? How do I make my dick bigger? How do I get a stronger erection? All this sort of stuff. And the shift there, what I'm kind of speaking about, that psychological shift, is going from performance-oriented sex to pleasure-oriented sex. As you kind of pointed out, it's like there's a need to kind of focus on pleasure. And that mentality, that pleasure-oriented mentality, is not concerned with how you measure up to someone else. It's like more concerned with how do you feel in this moment, right? Was it enjoyable? Was the sex fun? Did you have a good time? Did your partner enjoy themselves? Was it pleasurable for the two of you? Was it satisfying? Do you want to do it again? Do you not want to do it again? Like the focus is a lot more on like the experience in the now, rather than like the, oh God, what if I am less than this other guy who lasts so long? So that's where the shift psychologically, I think, needs to come in, is going from performance mindset to a pleasure mindset.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. I don't want to forget any of them, so I'm going to tell them both together. The first one is, you talked about limiting beliefs and how to break them down. So what beliefs do you think, and you just mentioned one now, from I have to be this way to pleasure, or what other, I imagine like column beliefs that can hold a new man, a new masculinity, do you think is important? And the other question, just I don't want to forget, how can women support men that are in this process?
Beautiful.
Not helping them not to compare with others, but what other ideas do you have?
Yeah, I really love those 2 questions. I get asked that second question all the time, so I'm happy to speak into
Great.
it as well. That first one, I mean, a limiting belief here that I definitely, and you mentioned masculinity, so I'll speak into that. There's an idea that masculinity is a monolith. And what I mean by that is like that there's only one way of expressing masculinity, right? Like it's like this is what masculinity is. And you even see it like in the tantra sacred sexuality space. They're like, this is divine masculinity, you know. It's like, okay, that's great. Or you know, this is you know, in the men's workspace, this is like deep masculinity, or this is like divine masculinity. It's very much like this is what masculinity is.
You have the toxic man and the enlightened man and nothing in between.
Right, 100%. Yeah, yeah, that exactly. You're 100% right. And so like the belief that I have, and the you know, the kind of challenge to that idea is that masculinity is it doesn't exist. Masculinity as a singular thing, it doesn't exist. But masculinities, plural, exist in the hundreds, right? Exist in the, you know, however many you can think of, because there is like there's different cultures around masculinity. Like the fucking Boy Scouts have their version of masculinity. Like the Hasidic Jews have their version of masculinity. Here in Australia, like we've got a culture around masculinity called like the larrikin, right? It's a expression of masculinity that I've subscribed to when I was younger. You know, there's masculinity in the southern states of America where I went to as well. Masculinity means a certain thing. There's masculinity in the way that you express it in, you know, other areas geographically around the world. So masculinities is very much a thing. And I think like shifting your mentality from, okay, this is what masculinity is, this one singular thing, to, oh wow, all these different ways of expressing masculinity are all valid and are all accessible to me, and I can explore those. Personally really helped me when it came to like finding who I was as a man and as a human being in the world and how I showed up. But it's definitely like, if I relate that to sexuality, it totally changes like the way you interact with a partner. You know, it's part of sacred sexuality, and this is like a very David Data kind of talking point, but it's like this polarity, right? The masculine, feminine polarity. And it's like, you know, that doesn't really leave a lot of room for exploration, right? It's like one person's in their masculine, another person's in their feminine. And it's like, well, you know, that kind of says masculine has to be one thing and feminine has to be another thing. And there's like, if you're not in both of those things, then like, you know, I see a lot of like fear mongering around it in the tantra community.
Thank you
like
so
that,
much,
you know,
because I struggled reading that book, and now I have a
yeah.
more of a knowledge why I couldn't. Yeah, I learned a lot, and it was really challenging for me and triggering. Actually, it was triggering for me to read it.
Yeah, I mean, there's some lovely like ideas in
I,
there, but I think there needs to be some conversation around it. So like my encouragement for men and for people in general, but I work with men, is to like explore the vast range, the broad range of masculinities that are available to you. And this is why I think it's really, you know, valuable to speak to gay men, to speak to trans men, to speak to you know, non-binary masculine individuals, because there's like so many ways of tapping into masculinity, as it's like in a collective sense, that you can kind of find what feels right for you. So when someone asks me like, how do you define masculinity, I always don't have an answer for them, because I'm always like, well, masculinity for me, I can define. I can tell you what makes me feel masculine and how I show up in the world in what I feel is a masculine way compared to something that's feminine, let's say. But who am I to then impose that onto someone else, right? Who am I then to say that this is what masculinity should look like for you?
and
So I
it's the
think
good
like,
one. The good
yeah, and that this is the healthy one, right? Like,
yeah.
So that's like a limiting belief there, right? And that's a major one, especially for the guys that I work with. They well, not always, but a lot of them come in thinking this is what it means for me to be a man, and well, actually they go, this is what I think it means to be a man because I've seen this somewhere else, and so they like apply to themselves this external idea of masculinity, and so we kind of break that down and go, well, how does it, you know, what makes you feel masculine? You know, it could be having a bubble bath and you know, recuperating and like tapping into your body. That could be a really masculine thing for you. Or it could be going out and chopping some fucking wood, you know, and building a fire. That could make you feel really masculine. Like, what does it specifically feel like to you?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's a major one. And I guess like if I speak into a little bit more, like one of the reasons why I like to challenge that a lot is because we can get up in our head about it, right? Especially that, like, you know, polarity situation. It's like, instead of being in the moment and being sexual and connecting with your partner, a lot of guys when they hear about polarity, get caught in their head of like, oh my god, am I masculine enough right now? Am I in my masculine? Oh, is my partner in their feminine? Or I've got to do these things to make sure. It's like, you're
You
getting
missed
pulled
the
out of the
point.
experience. Yeah, totally, totally. You're getting pulled out of like that pleasure. That sex is supposed to be pleasurable. So, and so I noticed that happening a lot. Is like this overemphasizing of like, oh, am I doing this? Should I be doing this? Is this right? Rather than being like throwing that out the window a little bit and just like dropping into the body and just noticing this feels fucking good, or oh, I feel some resistance here. What's going on? So there can be that over analyzing, I suppose, when it comes to masculine, feminine polarity stuff. So it gets a little heady. Yeah, that's what I'll share on that. The other question was, what can women do if they've got a male partner? And I answer this question in kind of two parts. The first part is like, women have done a lot of lifting for men historically, right? Like a lot of women have felt burdened to carry men's emotional weights. Like a lot of guys don't feel comfortable talking about their emotions, and so a lot of women have to kind of like bear that burden of his like lack of expressiveness or his lack of emotion. And so like there's, especially like within certain circles, there's this idea that like women have been coddling men for too long, and that they should just fucking stop doing that. And I get that, right? I get it. And that's a very like feminist talking point, I suppose. But I also think there's like a really a power that women have, especially if they've got male partners, to like hold their men through some vulnerability or through
Yes, I was
some
thinking, I don't know
journey.
if I want to stop cuddling. I do want to stop mothering
Yeah.
men. But I think it's okay to, I don't know, but
Yeah, no,
I
I agree with you. I agree with you there, and that's like, so that's why I wanted to address, because I definitely feel from some women I've spoken to, they go, I don't give a fuck what he does anymore. I'm over it, and I definitely want to acknowledge that energy that some women hold, because it's definitely a thing. And so that's not necessarily what I'm advocating for. I'm not necessarily advocating for mothering, right? I'm not advocating for like treating your partner like a child. Because that's not conducive to a healthy relationship. So, good. So cool. I think we're on the same page. So what I want to encourage is like this empowering, right? So like empower your man to be able to open up and to explore. Similar to what I invite the men that I work with to do, and men in general to do. It's like, how can you empower your partner? How can you empower the woman that you're in a relationship with to like open up and explore her sexuality and her femininity or her masculinity or whatever it is that she's going on a journey with. So like supporting your partner in that. And so some specific suggestions I have here is like, let's talk about talking about sex first, right? Like, so conversations, like a lot of guys have resistance to just having a conversation around sex and sexuality. There's like discomfort, or there's, awkwardness, and they're not really sure like how to bring something up. And so, a simple, practical thing that women can do if they want to have a conversation with a guy, a vulnerable conversation, is go out and do something with him. So go and have a walk with him, or go for a drive, or like if you two like do something physical together. I know some couples go hiking, or they ride their bikes, or they do something together, something physical. Like do something physical together and have a conversation then. The reason why I suggest that is because it gets him into his body, right? It gets you into your body as well, but specifically it gets him into his body, and it can get him out of his head. And so when I give that as a suggestion to couples and they do it, they often find that it was a lot easier for him to speak about something vulnerable, because he wasn't so up in his like mind of like overthinking about things. He's like moving his body, and it's just kind of coming a bit easier and a bit more naturally for him to share. So that's the first suggestion that I have is do something physical. The other suggestion that I have, I suppose, is like, especially if you're talking about sex, is like pre-frame the conversation and frame it in a certain way that keeps it positive and keeps it pleasure oriented. And so what I kind of mean by this is like, there's like this trope in TV and movies where it's like, hey, we need to have a talk, and it's like dun dun dun, this like really scary. Oh God, the talk. Oh God, what's it gonna mean?
Next chapter, you're gonna know what the talk is about.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it's this just like oh God, this like horrible thing that's about to come. And so what I encourage here is like, if you want to have a conversation, rather than like spring the conversation on your partner, because that's never really a great idea. Say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about sex. I'd love to talk to you about exploring more. But in terms of like keeping it positively framed, it's like, hey, I really enjoy having sex. I really enjoy having sex with you. I want to have more sex. I want to explore more. I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. Like, can we go for a walk and have a chat? And so like, rather than being like, the sex is shit, we need to do something about this.
I'm
Let's have a
bored.
talk. Yeah,
I'm gonna
right.
look for somebody
Exactly.
else.
Yeah, you're a shitty lover. Like, we need to do something about this, right? So same conversation, very different pre-framing, right? So that's like keeping it positive, because that'll help him to not shut down, right? Especially because a lot of guys, and this, is the work that I try and do, is help guys get their ego out of their sexual experiences. But a lot of guys, their ego is, wrapped up in their sexual experiences. And so if you're coming in saying, you're shit in bed, we need to change things up, I'm bored, like that's going to trigger his ego, and he's going to shut down to that, get defensive, which he shouldn't in the first place, because ego shouldn't be a part of the bedroom. But for a lot of men, unfortunately, it is. So that's the first thing. And the second thing is like keeping things pleasure oriented as well. So, what I kind of mean by this is like, if you're talking specifically about sex, it's like instead of saying, I don't like it when you do this, right? This feels painful, right? This hurts. And I 100% advocate for like saying that firstly. Like, if something is painful, you need to speak up. And I recognize that's difficult to do for some women, but I'm really advocating like that open communication around discomfort and pain. But once you're kind of beyond that and you've kind of voiced those boundaries, it can be really helpful to frame things like, where's more pleasure going to come from? I really want to explore this. I'm quite interested in this. Like, I've seen this, in porn, and I actually want to try it. Or, someone was talking about this in a podcast. I would love to try this. I think it'd be a lot more pleasure there. I think there'd be, something for us to explore. So like keeping things pleasure oriented, as opposed to like, pleasure negative, let's say, where it's like, that doesn't do it for me. I don't like this. I don't like that. This feels awkward. This feels painful. Definitely speak out about pain. Like, I don't want to dismiss that. Definitely speak out about pain. But yeah, if you're able to like bring something to the table of like, hey, I'd love to, explore more pleasure with you in this way, men can be a lot more receptive to that conversation. And again, it's because there's an ego wrapped up in it. Like, if guys find out that what they've been doing is really not doing it for you, they can become very defensive about it. I speak from personal experience, and I speak from a lot of men talking about sex with me about it as well.
And I like how this also challenges our challenges, because what happens in female bodies sometimes is that we don't know about our own pleasure. So what that brings with is that I shall explore my own sexuality and my pleasure, because if I say, I don't like what you are doing, but I have no clue what it can make difference. I have no clue about what I enjoy, because I've never touched myself, or I've never explored, or I'm afraid, or I don't know my own body and my own pleasure. So it's perfect, because to everything you mentioned, it was like I had the perfect fit regarding the challenges of a female body. So that's really awesome. How
Totally. Yeah, you're
yeah
100% right. Like, there's this it's we both go on journeys, right? Like, in a partnership, we go on a journey individually, and then we go on a journey as a couple as well. So there's three journeys that are happening, right? Like, I'm doing mine, my partner's doing hers, and then together we're doing something together. So there's this like
yeah.
really beautiful.
And I was thinking also on men sexuality and intimacy, how everything you said, I think would go well as well. I can imagine. And there are other challenges if two men talk about their sexuality and intimacy. But I don't know if
Yeah.
there's a step left, because we went to talk about discomfort and be pleasure oriented. Um,
Yeah, the last thing I'll kind of say around this is like, in the moment now, right? So we kind of like, um, pre-frame the conversation and having the conversation, and now like, you know, things are like happening. And so I get a lot of like women ask me, if my guy comes really quickly, what do I do in that moment when he's just ejaculated quickly? Or my guy loses an erection halfway through sex, what do I do in that moment when he's lost his erection?
Yes.
And so here's like um, another invitation that I you know give to women, which is like recognize your power in those situations. Like a lot of guys feel very vulnerable in that space, right? They've just come quicker than both of you would like. He's going to be very vulnerable in that space. He's lost his erection, or he's lost some firmness of his erection halfway through sex. He's going to be in a very vulnerable space. And so as a woman in that moment, one of the things to catch yourself from doing is like firstly shaming. So that can be a really you know, it can have a really detrimental impact. And a lot of guys share with me that when they were younger, particularly, that if they came quickly and they're, you know, the young woman they were being sexual with said something, he still holds on to that, you know, to this day, 10, 15, 20 years later. So a lot of guys can feel not only a lot of shame internally, but their partners, without really knowing it, might do something or say something that make him exacerbate that shame. So that's the first thing, is like, you know, just being mindful of like not shaming him in that moment, if this is your partner. And the second thing is like, here's a practical thing, is like recognize the power in your hands. And so what I mean by this is like, you know, after an ejaculation, a guy's typically going to go flaccid. And if a guy's losing an erection, well, he's, that by definition, he's flaccid as well. And so like I kind of equate that flaccidness with that softness and that vulnerability, excuse me. And so like that's kind of like a physical manifestation of that vulnerable space to be in.
I love that image and idea.
Right. And so a lot of women, firstly, don't really know what to do with a flaccid penis. Like they're,
Yeah.
you know, there's no real education around like, oh, this is a flaccid cock now, what do I do with it? That's a whole different conversation. But recognizing that like you can gently place your hands, like one hand over his like flaccid cock, another hand over his heart, and just like invite him to breathe and just hold him in that space, can be a very like vulnerable, intimate, powerful thing for a woman to do for him specifically. You know, kind of lets him know it's okay. Like it's not, this isn't the end of our relationship. It's not the end of our experience right now. Like it's fine. Like
It
I've
doesn't
got you
even
in this.
have to
I'm
be the
not
end
going
of
anywhere.
sex.
Right. It doesn't. Yeah. So that's like the whole idea here is like, yeah, ejaculation and erections are very much framed as like necessary for sex, right? So there's a whole story around like, well, what does sex mean to you, and what's the definition of sex? And so like holding and placing your hand on his heart and on his cock can be an invitation to be like, hey, just take a few moments, like let's gather ourselves, like I'm still here, I'm not going anywhere. Build that like gentle arousal back up, build that pleasure back up, and start that, you know, whole process again, and let's keep on going, right? So having that like, you know, this is something I say to guys a lot, is like, if you do come quite quickly, just having this mentality of like, oh shit, I just came, like, doesn't matter, because we can still keep going. I've got a tongue, I've got toys, I've got fingers, I've got toes, I've got a whole other body. We can keep on exploring pleasure. Like, let's, you know, don't worry about it. Like, I'm still here, I'm not going anywhere. Like, you know, that's a mentality that guys can have as well, is like this pivot, right? It's like, oh, I've just ejaculated, oh, I lost some erection. Oh, no problem. Let's like focus on pleasure still, but in a different way. And very often what will happen is, if he's, you know, lost an erection during sex, just focusing on that pleasure, getting out of his head and back into his body again, which you can help him with, is going to be helpful to bring that erection back. Same thing if he's ejaculated quite quickly, 10, 15 minutes of refractory period, still focus on pleasure, focus on some toys, maybe focus on some fingers. 15 minutes later, he's going to get an erection again and go for round two, essentially. So that's like in the moment, what you can do is like hold that space. Don't let it don't let it be the end of sex, I think is a beautiful way of thinking about it. Like, can you focus on pleasure still? Can you hold each other? Can you still be in that moment rather than letting it take you out of that space together? That's like a really, and it takes a bit of practice as well. Like, it'll trigger some stories, right? Like very much trigger some stories like, oh, something's wrong, right? Especially like if he loses an erection, there can be this feeling of like, oh, he's not attracted to me, or I'm not hot enough for him, or like I'm not doing something that he likes. I speak to a lot of women about like what erections mean to them. Same thing with like an ejaculation as well. Ejaculation like can mean something. So like just ask yourself, if you're a woman that has sex with men, like what does an ejaculation mean to you? If an ejaculation is present, what does that mean? If there's no ejaculation, what does that mean to you? Like what does that symbolize? Same thing with an erection. If a guy has an erection, what does that mean to you? If he doesn't have an erection, like again, what stories and what meanings does that have for you? So interrogating those can be a really helpful way of like helping you in that moment when those things happen. So yeah, that's kind of as much as I can speak into at the moment.
Thank you so much for all of that. I was thinking about how sex and lovemaking and is a conversation. So if sex is not the act of penis into vagina, but it's a conversation that two people or three people or me with myself have. Um, and in Spanish we have a word, I don't know if you can play with the same in English, which is like phallocentrismo. It's like everything centered on the penis.
Yeah.
And
Phallocentrism is
yeah.
in English. Very similar.
So when you take like sex, or you take sexuality instead of sex, you take like a conversation, and then love making, you can have 15 minutes of pleasure but while laughing and looking at memes. I don't know, like there's so many things you can do in that period. You can continue of course with more obvious sexual things, but like what if it's part of a conversation? What if we like go prepare a coffee and then we continue? And I think then it's when pleasure really arises, and you can, or you take a nap. Let's like lay here and listen to some music, or tell each other we love us or whatever. So yeah, I really thank you so much for all this insight that really goes with my experience working with women, and of course with my own experience as well. Yeah, thank you. And you mentioned something, or something brought me to think about taboo topics as well. I think we were talking about, yeah, also broadening the spectrum. I just want to mention and ask you about, what do you see is taboo regarding men's and pleasure, if we take away the phallocentrismo? And I was thinking about, yeah, toys or anal play. What are I guess those are the two main taboos, but maybe there are others. What can you tell me about this?
Yeah, so yeah, you hit the nail on the head with regards to toys and prostate stimulation. Yeah, so there's like this fear of using toys because there's this story that like, you know, guys shouldn't need to use toys because they can just use their hands, and you know, male sexuality is very simple and very linear and straightforward. Toys don't, you know, come into that. They're not necessarily, you're a bit of a loser if you use a toy. Why don't you just get a real partner? You know, like there's a lot of stories around and stigmatization around toy use. And then leading into that is you know, prostate play and anal stimulation. And again, there's a lot of internalized homophobia with this one. So like, if I like anal play, does that mean I'm gay? If I, you know, let my partner put a finger up my bum, does that mean I'm less of a man because I'm not, you know, because again, that masculinity, right? We spoke about this before, but like that very rigid way of thinking about masculinity is, it's like penetrative, and it's the assertive. And even like in David Data and the tantric community, masculinity is framed as penetrative. And so like, when guys get wrapped up in that, if they're being penetrated anatomically, they think it means something less about their masculinity. And you know, this is where I think, you know, this is just so off topic, but like, I think it's quite funny, is like, well, I think it's really valuable to talk to like gay men, for example, who are power bottoms, right? Who are, you know, for people that know about the gay subcultures, they might recognize that term straight away. But like this idea of like, you can be the assertive dominant partner who's being penetrated, right? You don't have to be the penetrator to be the dominant one. And like, I think about, you know, if we think heterosexual here, like a woman who's like on top of a man, and maybe he's like tied down to a bedpost and she's riding him. Well, she's the dominant person in that space, right? She's the kind of more assertive. but she's the one that's being penetrated by him. So you can play around with those dynamics. So I think it's a really valuable thing to play around with. That's just a side note there. So like a lot of men have this fear of being penetrated because of what it means about their masculinity. They think that there's a switch up their ass that if they press it, it's going to turn them gay. That's not how sexuality works. There's a lot of taboo-ness around that, stigmatization around that. There's a few others, but those are the major ones. Yeah, we'll stick to those. Otherwise, I'll speak for years. Something that I'm noticing at the moment, and we were speaking about this before we jumped on the podcast or on this conversation. Sorry, was this new taboo that I'm leaning into now, which is like fatherhood as well. Like, what does it mean to be a dad and to be expressive with my sexuality? And I speak personally from my experience as a dad. And model that for my son. Like, what does that kind of look like? What about, parenthood, sex, and being a parent? I don't specifically work with fathers. I don't promote my work to dads. I'd love to do more of that. It's still something that I am learning myself. I'm definitely not an expert on fatherhood or parenting at the moment, having only been a parent for a year. But there's like some taboo-ness and some stigmatization there about what it means to be a parent and to explore your sexuality and to express your sexuality, or even during pregnancy as well. That was a whole part of like my sexual exploration with my partner, was like, as her body's changing, how do I show up sexually with her as she's changing, and as my attraction and shifting of desire for her is changing as her body changes. So there's a lot of taboo-ness, I suppose, and stigmatization around like pregnancy and birth and childhood, and being a parent, I suppose, and sexuality. So that's another major one I'm just like noticing, but it's a little different, right? It's like, it's spoken about a bit more, parenthood and fatherhood, but there's still like the underlying stigmatization around being a sexual father.
Yeah. Oof, thank you. I think you mentioned, I think I also heard you talking about the importance, or of course you don't have to, but they say, okay, if you're a man and you want to be with a woman and you want to higher your volume as a lover somehow, like, I don't want to tell you to become a better lover, but like higher your volume in some qualities, it's a good idea to get the feeling how it is to be penetrated.
Yeah, totally. Like, if you want to be a better penetrator, learn what it's like to be penetrated. Pretty much is like my
yeah.
it's one of my phrases. Because you figure out how slow you need to go, how turned on you need to be, how much lube you need to use, how attuned to physical sensations you need to be if there's any tension or tightness. You learn all these things that experientially you learn them, that you can apply straight to like, oh, I've got to now pay attention to that in my partner, right? Am I penetrating her too quickly? Am I rushing in and she's too tense? Am I using it? Is she lubricated enough? Am I losing enough lube? Like all this stuff that we never really experience ourselves, you can experience that, and then you can apply that learning to being sexual with a partner when you become the penetrator again.
Yeah, and then I don't know, but I have this recommendation, and I would love to know if you would have it as well, or if this is not true for you. To start with yourself, and then is when toys come in. Like, if it's too much for me, if I think like my girlfriend doing the things to me, or to put on a pegging device, and okay, that seems like a lot. Well, what happens if I start with myself, with my own finger as a man, or as a woman as well, like with an anal plug, if I don't want a man to penetrate me from behind? Like, is it the same? Would you say that as a good idea to start with toys or with yourself, and then with your partner, female or male?
Yeah, it's a great idea. I think it's a great idea in general. Even if we're taking toys out of it, I think if you're spending time exploring your body first and learning about your sexuality and getting this like more robust understanding about it, that's going to translate across much more easily to sex with a partner, as opposed to like not doing that and just trying to do things with your partner. It's gonna be a bit more of an uphill battle. But yeah, 100% with toys, like explore, even like explore the rest of your body. So like a taboo that's kind of related to this is like guys exploring anything other than their penis, right? Like it could be like their nipples, or it could be their chest, or it could be their thighs, or it could be anywhere, like your whole body. I often say, one of my other little catchphrases is, you're not just your dick, you're actually one huge dick, and you can explore pleasure from the tips of your toes to the crown of your head. You're not limited to just your genitals. So So I get men to do that during their self-pleasuring when they work with me, and I encourage it on social media, is like just exploring your whole body, so that then when you're with a partner and they ask you, what do you like? Right? Or hopefully they're asking, what do you like? Or you're able to initiate that conversation and say, hey, I actually really like it when my nipples are played with, or I really like it when, someone puts their hand around my throat, or whatever it is, right? Like you have learnt about that from doing it with yourself, and then you can bring that into your sexual experience with a partner from a bit more of a self-assured, from a bit more of a confident place, right? But yeah, definitely toys as well. Like if you're exploring, I don't know why, but whenever I talk about anal play, people always think like sticking a whole arm up there, and it's like you don't have to start there.
Which I learned
There's
is a
nothing.
term called fisting, but
Yes, fisting. Yes,
oh my
exactly.
god.
So, and like you can do that for sure, but that's not where I'm
Yeah, this one
inviting you
as
to start.
well.
Yeah, exactly. You can stick like just the tip of your little pinky finger up there and explore that. In fact, you don't even have to penetrate at all. You can explore like, like just massaging around the buttocks. You can explore like just the opening. Like you don't have to put anything in there to explore another area of your body, right? And to bring those taboos and that stigmatization and those stories up. You can do that in different ways. So
Actually, you
yeah.
have to should go. No, the have to should. We can leave that aside.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, that's my but I'm in agreement with you 100%. Is like explore things by yourself and explore them incrementally as well. You don't have to jump straight into the deep end. If you're interested in like some sort of bondage and BDSM, you don't have to go straight to all these restraints and whips and
Cross.
chains into a
Yeah.
dungeon and all that sort of stuff. You can start with just like gently tying your wrist and noticing how it feels to have the pressure of something tied around your wrist and what that
Yeah.
feels like. So yeah, there's little ways you can start to explore it rather than going straight deep into this really big experience.
Wonderful. Uh, Another day, I would love to make an interview just regarding toys. But today you talked about something that is really near to my heart, which is fatherhood. And what I feel is, and I'm going to just go right into fatherhood and sexuality. If it's okay for you, that we take a few more minutes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome. Here, what I feel is like if you talk about fatherhood and sexuality, it's like when women are pregnant, then the men and even the women they go say, "Oh, go fuck now because you're never gonna fuck again." It's like a
Mm.
joke. It's like a threat. It's like a do it the same thing. Like you're never gonna sleep again. You're never gonna have sex again. So it's like a joke. Like I think between colleagues. And I think there's so much pain. Like if I would hear a man say, "Ooh, better go do it now because you're never gonna do it again," I would like want to go and hug him and say, "Ooh, how are you doing?" Like this
Mm.
really sounds tough, but that's like the only thing they mention is like you're never gonna do anything again. Like your hand is gonna be your best friends, and that's it. So
Yeah.
even though you're not an expert, you're a man that became a father and who works with sexuality. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak from personal experience here that, yeah, your sex life changes. We're having a lot less sex now, my partner and I, than we did before she got pregnant. And the the journey that we're going on at the moment together is like, well, how do we meet our intimacy needs? How do we meet our sexual needs with each other if that way of exploring our sexuality together is not as frequently available to us because we've just got a little human being all the time with us. So there's
Running
like a very
around.
practical, yeah, and he's running around and he's crazy. So like there's a very, very practical element to that, right? And so like there is a little bit of truth when people say this, right? But they're maybe saying it from like a place of wounding and from a place of like not having gone on that sexual journey, right? Because it like within that, it's like the story is, oh, masturbation's kind of second best to sex, right? And like, it's kind of seen as this, thing that you shouldn't have to do, right? Within that framework of what that guys have said. So we've talked about, my partner and I, about self-pleasuring and how important that is, and then how do we meet our needs for intimacy that doesn't look like penis and vagina sex? Making we have a lot of showers together, right? And so there's an opportunity to connect there, the two of us. Or I love what you said before about like making coffee in between like sexual experiences. It's like we will cook naked, right? And so like having opportunities to just like connect with each other's bodies in an intimate, sensual way that isn't explicitly like sexual. So there's opportunities there to connect, but like you've got to. I think what was beneficial for my partner and I was we were doing a lot of that before, like when we
Mm.
first met, really.
Yes.
So before we were being sexual, so we weren't having to learn all that. Like whilst we were also trying to be new parents, we had kind of learned all that already, and then it was helpful to bring that in a little bit more when we became parents. So I think it's tough for people that are parents and also trying to learn everything sexually at the same time. It's a
Yeah.
fucking lot, you know. So I recognize that it's a bit of an uphill battle, and so that's where I'm wanting to learn more. Is like how can I speak to parents who are in that space where they haven't maybe done a lot of that work prior to parenthood, and now they're wanting to change things up, and what can I do to speak to them? So I'm still learning there, but yeah, there's conversations there around like self pleasure within a relationship. There's conversations there about like intimacy needs and how to meet those in a non explicitly sexual way, and like a recognition as well that your sex life changes throughout your relationship, right? And so a lot of people joke about like the honeymoon period, and
Yeah.
then after the honeymoon period, things change, and it's
Like
like
it's honeymoon and death and
right, yeah,
desert.
and that's kind of and that change is seen as kind of like a bad thing, right? And it's kind of how it's often framed, like, oh, the honeymoon period's over, right? And it's like this horrible thing. But like recognizing that there are like seasons and there are fluctuations and there are changes within your sex life and your relationship is super important because things will look differently, right? As you age, or as one partner gets sick, or as one partner becomes pregnant, or as you've got a child in the mix. Like things do shift and change, and having that flexibility and that openness to that fluctuation and change, and to know that maybe there's a period of time where you are having less sex, and that's totally fine, and there'll be a period of time where you're having more sex again, and there might be some time where you're having less sex. Like, being open to that fluctuation, I think is really important, really necessary to recognize. So um, yeah,
I
that's
love
kind of
what
where I'm
you
at.
mentioned regarding the seasons, because maybe you can be like in a winter, and winter is quite nice. You can cuddle a lot. There's an intimacy that only happens if you go through a sort of a death, like in winter.
Mm,
And then next spring, let's see what the next spring might bring. And if you like say, okay, this is the end, I'm gonna just like an addict go for another spring, for another summer, change partners, fall in love again, go to the honeymoon phase. I think we can lose the opportunity of how the spring after winter looks like. And maybe in
mm,
another kind aspect of your relationship, you are in summer. Like I can only imagine how it is to see your son running around, and the complicity and the intimacy you have as a mother and father of your son together, you know? And then also I was thinking, I work with couples, and when they get pregnant, I think I always talk about this, about the love languages.
mm,
Because like if you take, because if the man, especially if the man main love language is sexuality, is or is sex, and say, okay, then it's even a bigger struggle, because maybe they have other love languages, and words of affirmation are even more spoken to, or gifts, or quality time, and all of these things. But I love this idea of what all the ways you can express intimacy, complicidad. I don't know if to say it in English. Yeah, this working together. Yeah, uh, being a team, and being in love in so many other ways.
yeah, yeah. I really appreciate that. Yeah, that rings true for me and my own experience as well. Yeah, it's just been a lot of learning, a lot of like self reflection, and I think there's speaking to a couple of dads, there's like a desire for things to go back to the way they were prior to having kids, and I think like especially because there's like a big transition period for women, right? Because they physically go through pregnancy and birth, and it's like there's like a lot of rites of passage for women in terms of like entering into motherhood, which is amazing. But there's not really a lot for dads and fathers going into fatherhood. And I speak from my own personal experience. Like there wasn't really anyone talking about like my transition into fatherhood, which I get, right? Because there's a lot of emphasis on mums, which is necessary. Um, and so I think there's like an important thing for dads to maybe explore, which is like, you know, things will never be the same again, right? Like you're entering a new phase of your life, right? And like recognizing that rite of passage into fatherhood or into parenthood, and acknowledging the kind of like you were saying before, like the death of a past relationship or the death of a previous version of your relationship, with your partner, but also relationship with yourself and how you interact with the world, to like the birth of this new part of yourself or this new relationship with this new iteration of yourself, and the way you show up in the world. Like that's something that I'm quite interested in, is like rites of passage, and transitions for men into fatherhood, because I think there's something there, that could help them with regards to like showing up in a different way, or like being more comfortable in that space, or recognizing that it is a change and that things are shifting and they do need to show up in a new way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's something around that.
Uh, I think it's as important, Cam, that men have this space, because, of course, I understand where we come from, and we have to speak up for women's rights and regarding birth. And yes, and this is major. Of course, it is. But if we do it on our own, like I am as a doula, I sometimes it's like I have to be the doula of the men, and I
Mm,
ask them like, where do you go to if you're afraid? You're allowed to be afraid. I think I only imagine seeing the love of your life screaming in pain. Death is near when a child is born. Of course, you're. Why shouldn't you be afraid? So, who are you going to call at 3 o'clock in the morning when you're afraid?
mm,
Which friend, father, mother can you call? Which pillow can you scream into? Because your woman, your wife, your partner needs you to be strong. But that doesn't, because if you're afraid, you know how it is. Like, but that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to be fearful, because it's fucking scary, I imagine.
mm.
So I think please do this work, Cam, uh, uh, because we can't change the world only focusing on the female perspective and women's right. It is the thing we have to do, and I, as a feminist, as a social worker, as a everything, as a human being, I think it's the path. But I dream of it together,
Mm.
and I imagine it's not easy, and it's so important to talk about these taboo topics. Fatherhood is still a taboo topic. Sexuality definitely is, and pleasure, and bringing them together, yeah, super
Yeah,
important. So thank you
yeah.
so much. And
No, I
please go
appreciate you
on.
saying that as well. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you pretty much spoke directly to my experience as well. It's probably, I often say this, but like the birth of my son and what seeing my wife go through birth was the most terrified I've ever been in my life. Um, yeah, with hands down, the most scared I've ever been. So yeah, you speak directly into my experience. I appreciate you naming that. Thank you.
Thank you. So, slowly wrapping this up so you can start your day in Australia. If you would have kind of a magic wand that changes how this world is, and you can make it easier for men, what is your biggest dream regarding why you're doing your work?
Oh wow. Um,
If
I
you would
think
be Harry Potter.
if I could just wave a wand. I think what I try and do with my work and what I really hope for is, I was speaking to a little bit before, but it's for men um to be curious about their masculinity, right? To like to and part of that is their sexuality and the way they show up as a sexual man, but like to let go of those um like really narrow, rigid ways of thinking about masculinity, um, and because it's limiting you. It's putting you in a box, and it's stopping you from exploring and expressing your kind of full self.
Mm.
You're putting parameters on how you show up. So what I would love is to just like open some minds, right? Is to like, open up some curiosities to kind of like unlock that door to that box, and just allow men to be a bit more, a bit more freedom in terms of expressing themselves, in terms of exploring their masculinity, finding what works for them. And they might find that when they've gone on that journey of exploration, that, oh, actually the way they're expressing their masculinity was working for them, and that's what they resonate with the most, and that's what feels right for them, and so they come back to that. But how do you ever know that if you never go on this journey to find, yourself, or to find what version of masculinity works the best for you and what resonates with you the most? I think there's like, yeah, um, my passion lies in like opening minds and inviting curiosity. So if I could wave a magic wand, I would hope that men are all, able to open themselves up a little bit more to learning about their masculinity, and exploring and challenging it a bit more.
Thank you, because you also answered another question in there that's like where to start. And if somebody listens to this interview and hasn't, uh, I don't know, read any book or done anything, or it's like the first time, oh, I can work on my sexuality, or oh, there's something that's maybe hurt inside regarding this, or how I should be. And you answer this with a simple way. Let's just start. Be curious. This, and I saw you a few days ago about this topic of being curious as a big tool, or maybe door you can open and see what's on the other side.
Yeah, totally. I mean, a good place to start is my social media pages. So I don't want to plug
Yeah,
myself, but I try and offer as many different resources, and
that's true.
I've got a podcast and things like that. So yeah, if you're looking for a place to start having conversation around masculinity and sexuality, and anything I said resonated with you, then yeah, definitely check my page out. I try to be as educational as possible. That's something that's really of value to me. But yeah, just like, do some googling, find some people. There's I'm a little hesitant to say that, because there's some really shitty men's coaches out there that reinforce ideas around masculinity and things like that. So, but yeah, just do some searching, just
Yeah,
type some stuff in to Google, like
yeah.
listen to some gay men, listen to some trans men. Like there's so much value in just like diversifying where you're getting information about masculinity from. So that would be my encouragement.
That's something I think it's really important to talk to all the types, like younger, older, all the religions, all the situations. I think that's really important. It's something I really enjoy about your podcast as well, is how you start your podcasts,
Ah,
honoring the land you're in. Of course, I had to Google because I had no idea about the story of Australia, and um, uh, I think that's also really important advice, to be open-minded and not only to hear to hetero cis men or hetero cis women of white skin that are young
yeah,
and have
yeah,
all the
exactly.
privilege. So I thank you for that advice as well. Um, Cam, thank you so much for the time. Thank you so much for your generosity and your humbleness to be here. Um, what do you take from all of we talked? What do you take from this conversation with you? I don't know where
Um,
to start, so I ask you. I'm
my
not gonna say
what I'm taking with me. Well, you know what? I'm excited to. I think we were speaking about getting this translated, right, or getting some subtitles in Spanish. And you know what? That is something that I'm taking away, is like a desire and a passion for getting conversations like this, not just my work, but work like this in general, more accessible, to be more available to people, to be a bit more inclusive. I think like there's so much value in being able to do that. So yep, I mean, my dad speaks fluent Spanish. I don't, so it's something that I'm really interested in and wanting to learn. I'd love for my son to speak Spanish as well. So uh, so yeah, that's what I'm taking away. It's just like a newfound desire and passion to like really lean into Spanish speaking audience, and
Yes,
being able to connect with them a bit more. So yeah, thank you for that.
yes. Thank you so much for bringing Australia and Argentina closer, for bringing, yeah, like I look up to so many English speaking coaches and professionals and humans, actually, just humans as well. Um, and I think this was so exciting. Like I woke up and I had your answer, and it was like, yes, of course. Um, and um, it gives me, yeah, hopes, because this is a way of building bridges. And this is actually the reason why I give this course as well. I'm really privileged because I speak English. I'm really privileged because I had a scholarship for like an awesome course in English to become a love, sex, and relationship course. And then, of course, I want to share, like, and I learned things. I read, this started last year. I read the book Come As You Are,
Oh, yep.
which wasn't translated before. Now it is. I was
Mm.
like, I have to share this with the whole world. And that's why I do this pleasure school. And now I'm talking to you. So life is perfect. Thank you so much. Um,
Amazing. No worries. Thank you so much for talking to me. I really appreciate it.
yes, a big hug to Australia. Have a beautiful day. And please keep on doing your work because it's really important.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay.